This happened to me about 2 years ago, around late December of 2020. I was 19 around the time. Me and my girlfriend were at my grandparents' place having a couple drinks out in the garage until it got too cold to stay out there. It was one of the coldest nights of the year, and there was a bad blizzard that night. We live in Canada, by the way. We both went back to the house around 2 a.m. She went into my room, and I went out in the kitchen to cook something for us in the oven. I was on my phone, standing alone out in the kitchen, when my grandma and my girlfriend both walked out into the kitchen together. It was a bit strange because my grandma is never up that late, and it was even stranger that my girlfriend came out at the same time. The first thing my grandma said to me is, "Don't go back out there tonight. On a night like this, people lose their lives." I was a little bit freaked out because I was just about to head back out to the garage to grab something. I never told anyone I was going back out. My girlfriend and my grandma just stood there staring at me with the weirdest expressions I've ever seen, with very unnatural smiles that did seem right. My girlfriend then walked over and gave me a hug. When I grabbed her, she was ice cold. I commented about this, and when I mentioned how cold she was, her expression changed. Her smile faded, and she looked up at me with really serious, sad eyes and didn't say anything. There was something else I noticed too. She smelled like a campfire, an earthy, smoky smell. There wasn't an explanation for this, and she didn't smell like that earlier. I swear at that moment, I got chills all over. There was something so off about it all, but I couldn't put my finger on it. My girlfriend whispered in my ear, "Don't go outside tonight." She walked back over to my grandma. She stood beside her with her head down and a serious expression, while my grandma was still staring at me with that weird fake smile. It was so bizarre, I just stood there speechless. The wind began to literally ing howl outside. My grandma turned and looked at my girlfriend. "Don't mess with black magic," she said. "Nothing good is going to come from it." My girlfriend didn't say anything. She continued looking down. I stood there confused. My girlfriend looked up at me. "We have to go now," she said. They both started walking away. My grandma looked back at me for a second. "See you on the flip side," she said with that weird smile. I got another chill through my whole body when she said that. They turned a corner and left the kitchen. I stood there for a while. I didn't know what to make of it all. I decided not to go out to the garage. I'd go out and get my stuff the next morning. I stayed out in the kitchen for another 10 minutes until the food was done. I went back into my room with it. My girlfriend was in bed laying down. She got up and we put on a movie. I guess I was quiet because she asked me, "What's wrong?" I told her everything was okay. It took me 10 minutes to say something about it because, to be honest, I was still frightened by it. I turned to her and asked why her and my grandma came out to the kitchen. The second I said that, my nose started bleeding. I ran to the bathroom and got something to stop the bleeding. When I went back in the room, I told my girlfriend everything. As you can guess, she said she never went out the kitchen, and she swore on someone's life she was in the room the whole time. She also didn't smell like smoke anymore. We went and woke up my grandma right after, and my grandma said the same thing. She actually thought we were trying to mess with her, and she didn't believe me. We were so freaked out after this, we had trouble sleeping for the rest of the night. The part that really messed my girlfriend up was when I told her about how cold she felt and how she smelt like smoke. The only explanation we could come up with was that maybe if I went outside that night, something bad would have happened to me. Maybe the spirits of dead relatives watching over me came to me in that form, so I wouldn't be scared, and they could get the message through. The last part of it that made sense was the part about the black magic. My girlfriend just got a book about witchcraft from her friend the week prior. My girlfriend never opened a book again after this. She took what was said as a warning. I've been thinking about writing this story down for the past 2 years, and my girlfriend encouraged me to finally do it, because maybe some else out there had an experience like this. To this day, I still get chills thinking about it, especially the last thing said. See you on the flip side. My day started off pretty normal. At 6:30, my alarm woke me up, and I proceeded with my normal routine, such as I showered, brushed my teeth, and threw my hiking gear on. I'm a pretty avid hiker. Wouldn't say very experienced, but I know what I'm doing, so I go every weekend when I can. Around 7:30, that was when I was ready to drive to my chosen hiking route, Basalt Mountain, Colorado. This was about a 3-hour drive from where I live, so I was pretty exhausted by the time I got there after being up so early. The hike started off great. The sun was beaming down on me, and I could hear all the birds singing and all the critters running around in the forests. Along my route that I chose, there was gorgeous views and amazing scenery, so I stopped whenever I could to take in the views and just live in the moment. A few times I stopped to make myself a coffee and to take some stunning photos for my friends back home in the UK. However, by the time I got to the top, I realized it was getting dark. This is when I noticed I was walking back in the dark. This is where it started to get creepy. On my way back down, I had a sharp feeling on the back of my head, like someone was watching me. I chose to ignore it and carried on walking. The thing is, though, the more I walked and the darker it got, the feeling kept getting more intense. In an act to distract myself, I whistled the tune to my favorite song. This is when I could hear someone walk behind me in the distance, but not too far to not hear them. Too far to see them, though. I kept glancing behind me and kept seeing nothing. Looked to my left and right, and still nothing. As I kept on walking, I could still hear it following me, and that sharp feeling of being watched was getting unbearable. About 40 minutes has passed since setting off back down, and I didn't notice whatever was following has been slowly getting closer. I realized this when I looked behind me about the 100th time, and this time I saw a deer. This wasn't a normal deer either. This deer looked like if it was dead, but somehow still alive. It had red, glowing eyes locked right onto me, its skin all patchy, and some of it hanging off too. Bones were sticking out off its limbs and chest, blood also dripping from its mouth. It just wasn't natural. By the time it sunk in to what I was looking at, it started walking to me at a fast pace. That ain't normal either, I thought. Then it hit me. I'm gonna die if I don't run. I flung my body around and started sprinting for my life with every ounce of energy I had. That's when I heard it. That shrill scream from behind. Sounded half human, half coyote. The human half sounded like a death scream. It sent chills down my spine and my shit into my pants. Footsteps were getting faster and closer behind me, but I kept on pushing. My legs were burning and my lungs screaming. I wanted to quit. That's when it was close enough I could hear it grunting. I was shitting myself. After running for what felt like an eternity later, I built up the courage to look over my shoulder. This was a mistake. What I saw was no longer a deer. What I was looking at was roughly 7 feet tall. It had abnormally long limbs, and it was insanely skinny with barely any muscle on its frame. What skin it had was gray and hanging from its limbs and torso, just like the deer. Some of it was human skin, some of it was animal skin. From what I could make out, the animal skin could have been from a deer or even a coyote. What creeped me out the most was its face. Well, lack of. 2 hollow and black pits replaced the eyes, and it had a gaping mouth with bloody razor-sharp teeth. Panic truly set in. Then I heard the scream again. At the same time, it swiftly swung its dangly arm at me, which had pointy, sharp, long fingers attached at the end of it. Ducking out the way of its arm, it managed to tear a chunk of flesh from my right shoulder. Blinding with pain, I tripped and fell down an embankment. Rolling down it, I missed a few trees but smashed into one of them. Winded, I feebly tried getting up, but to no avail. This was useless. My ankle was severely sprained, and I had no strength to get myself up off the ground. In a desperate attempt, I dragged myself into a bush so it couldn't see me. It was pitch black at this point. Rummaging around in my backpack like a madman, I clung onto my knife. Laying there in agonizing pain and wheezing, I could hear it grunting, walking around looking for me. I was shaking uncontrollably. I thought I was gonna die. After laying in the bush for what felt like hours, listening to it patrol the area around me and grunting, I had a moment of stupidity. Looking out of the bush, I no longer saw the 7 feet figure. I saw the silhouette of a deer feet away from me. With every ounce of courage and energy I had, I leapt out of the bush, throwing my body and my knife at the deer. Driving my knife into it. At the same time, an inhuman scream. Similar to the screams before that came from the deer. The deer fell limp, and so did my body next to it. Hoping I killed it and it's not going to kill me, I passed out from exhaustion. Waking up hours later, with the sun beaming down on my face with its warm rays, I realized I was still alive. However, the deer must be as well. Getting up and looking around, there was no sight of the deer nor my knife, just a blood trail going back to where I was running from. Then, I heard the same scream, again, from the same direction. Panic rushing my body again, I sprinted down the trail, still hearing the same scream over and over, getting closer and getting back to my car, throwing myself into it and sped to the closest hospital. That's the day I truly believed skinwalkers are real, and I managed to survive, somehow. I was driving home from a late-night shift at the hospital, feeling exhausted and sleepy. The road was dark and deserted, except for the occasional headlights of other cars passing by. I turned on the radio to keep myself awake, but the only station that came in was a creepy podcast about paranormal encounters. The host had a deep, raspy voice that sent shivers down my spine. He was telling a story about a hitchhiker who turned out to be a ghost. As I listened to the podcast, I noticed a figure standing by the side of the road, holding a sign that said, "Need a ride." It was a young woman wearing a white dress and a backpack. She looked harmless and innocent, so I decided to stop and offer her a lift. She thanked me and got in the car, placing her backpack on the floor. I asked her where she was going, and she said she was heading to the next town, where her family lived. She said she'd been backpacking across the country, but ran out of money and had to hitchhike. She seemed friendly and talkative, so I tried to make conversation with her. I asked her what her name was, and she said it was Anna. As we drove along, I noticed that the podcast was still playing, The host was getting to the climax of his story, and I felt a chill run through me as I heard his words. He said that the hitchhiker was actually a ghost who had died in a car accident on that same road years ago. He said that her name was Anna, and that she always wore a white dress and a backpack. He said that she would appear to unsuspecting drivers and ask them for a ride. He said that if they agreed, she would get in the car and then disappear, leaving behind only her backpack. He said that the backpack contained a severed head, which was the only part of her body that was never found after the crash. He said that this was her way of seeking revenge, and that anyone who saw her was doomed. As I heard this, I felt a surge of panic and disbelief. I looked at the woman sitting next to me and saw that she was staring at me with a twisted smile. She said, "You shouldn't believe everything you hear on the radio. Some stories are just made up to scare you, but some stories are true, and you just picked up the wrong hitchhiker." She reached for her backpack and unzipped it. I saw a flash of something bloody and gruesome inside. I screamed and swerved the car, trying to get away from her, but it was too late. She grabbed me by the neck and pulled me closer to her. She said, "Don't worry, I won't hurt you. I just want to show you something that belongs to me." The last thing I saw was her face, inches from mine. Her eyes were cold and dead, and her mouth was wide open, revealing sharp teeth. She bit into my ear, and I felt a searing pain. Then everything went black. I don't know how long I was unconscious, but when I woke up, I was lying on the side of the road, covered in blood. The car was wrecked, and the woman was gone. So was her backpack. The only thing that was left was the radio, still playing the podcast. The host was saying, "And that, my friends, is the end of tonight's episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something. Remember, the next time you see a hitchhiker, think twice before you stop. You never know who they might be or what they might want. Until next time, stay safe and stay scared." This is your host, signing off.